Good morning, Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. Good to see everybody out there today in virtual land. Happy Tuesday morning. This is our connection service at Spirit and Truth Sanctuary. So welcome to members, to first-timers, to those just curious about what this is all about. This is our Tuesday morning service when we come together to be fed, to be spiritually fed. This is our community of thinkers and higher thought. And we want to start today the right way. That is with the joy of the Lord, knowing that it's our strength, that we are clothed in our right mind, still seated at the Master Teacher, Jesus the Christ. Our spirits are open. Our hearts are ready to receive the word this morning. It is raining, and so for me, that is always a sign of cleansing, a sign of newness, a sign just to get still and open your heart, open your mind. All the little animals find their little places to hide and all their nooks and crannies. And I have some little hummingbirds at my house. They're not busy flying around. They're just hiding in their little place. And so find your spot. Find, as my sister used to say, find your cubby. Find your little cubby and get still, get quiet. Let's be ready to receive whatever God, whatever Spirit has for us today. God, we thank you for today. We thank you for life, health, and strength. We thank you that the word is nigh us, even near us, and in our mouth. God, we thank you that we live, move, and have our being in you. For it's in the name and nature of Jesus the Christ we pray that. Oh, it's amen. Amen.
Amen. When he said get still, that reminded me of a horrible part of myself. When we were younger, of course, I'm 8 years older than my brother, and you would never believe it to look at us now, but at one time I was bigger enough than him that I could actually make him do what I wanted him to do, even physically. And so when we would go on long trips, I would want to stretch out in the back seat, and he was, a lot smaller than me at the time, maybe 4 or 5 years old. So I would make him lie in the floorboard, and he would say, after you drive for a long time, especially it's usually when we would go on vacation in the summertime, he would say, it's so hot down here, and he would look up at me with his little red face, and I'd be like, just get still, you'll be cool. You're hot because you're moving around. I was so mean. I apologize. I was so mean to you. Okay. Let's start with our morning blessing this morning. Spirit of Truth, we come to you today to declare these intentions that we as a corporate body are focusing on this year. We have joyful, energetic bodies. We have loving, compassionate hearts. We have restful, alert minds, and we experience lightness of being in all things. It is our intention today and for the rest of this year to replace any resistance, disorder, effort, or struggle with gentleness, clarity, health, eagerness, love, joy, and freedom as our natural state. It is our prayer, our intention, and our heart's desire to be fully awake today and always. We believe it, we perceive it, and now we receive it in the name and nature of the Christ. Amen, and so it is. Okay, beginning with our quotes today. The first one is by John Lennon. Reality leaves a lot to the imagination. And I thought that was pretty clever because a lot of people see those two things as opposites, reality and imagination, but we're going to talk a little bit about that today. The next one, there are some people who live in a dream world, and there are some who face reality. And then there are those who turn one into the other. Douglas Everett. Next, reality is nothing but a collective hunch. Lily Tomlin said that. Our friend Frankie from our show that we watch. Yes. My brother thinks that I'm Frankie. He thinks I'm slowly turning into a hippie as I get older. Next, from Rick Riordan, humans see what they want to see. Next, and this is by William Blake. He is one of my favorite poets from the British Romantic period, which I studied in college. It was my favorite class. Everybody else hated it. It says, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up till he sees all things only through the narrow chinks of his cavern. I thought that was beautifully written. Next, a quote by Aldous Huxley. There are things known and things unknown, and in between are the doors of perception. Next, the eyes see only what the mind is prepared to comprehend. Robertson Davies. Next, Charles Bukowski said, can you remember who you were before the world told you who you should be? And lastly, from everybody's favorite, the Lion King, Simba. You have forgotten who you are. Look inside yourself. You are more than what you have become. You must now take your place in the circle of life. Remember who you are. Okay, that's our title today. Remember who you are. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's happened as a result of us forgetting who we are. We're going to talk about the nature of reality and what part our perception plays in it, as well as how to get back to who we really are. And I've got two of my favorite things to give you today, some song lyrics and science. So let's get started. When my older son, John Paul, was a little boy, his dad and I used to say that phrase to him almost every day when we would drop him out at school, or especially when he was going to be away from us to stay with a friend and be with another family. We'd say, remember who you are, son, which was our way of reminding him to behave himself, and a kind of shorthand for don't forget everything that we've taught you here at home when you walk out this door and you enter into a different environment. And interestingly enough, even though we thought he wasn't at times, he was listening. And the reason I know this is because on his 18th birthday, over my loud protestations, which didn't matter anymore because he was 18 and he legally did not need my permission anymore to do so, he got that tattooed in very large letters all the way across his chest. Remember who you are. And I guess in retrospect, I should be thankful because there are much worse sayings he could have ended up memorializing permanently on his body. And now I'm actually kind of proud of it. But just like we used to tell him that, and like I said, it was shorthand for don't forget what we've taught you, or more accurately, don't forget what you've learned here at home when you're in a different environment. I can just picture God saying that to us as we are leaving that realm of spirit, our home, to be born into the very different environment of our life here on earth. So I'm going to begin with a piece that has that same title, Remember Who You Are, a talk given by a man named David Icke. Now, David Icke is somewhat of a controversial figure. If you've heard of him, or if you have ever heard anything he's had to say, you might already have a strong opinion about him one way or the other. He's one of those people about which people are likely to say either you love him or you hate him. His message and the manner in which he delivers it seem to engender strong feelings of either one extreme or the other. But as I like to say, I am in the habit of affirming truth wherever I find it. And I also know that you don't have to agree with everything a person says to recognize when they are saying something that you do agree with and that resonates with you. So I hope everyone will keep an open mind, because I'm going to be sharing some information from two different talks of his that I've listened to, both of which resonated with me deeply. So let's begin with the first one. Remember who you are. He says, who are we? Let's start with who we're told we are. We are told we are our name, our family, our life story, our job, our income, our religion, our race, our sexuality. These are all expressions of the I, not the I, but the I, we are supposed to accept. But all they really are is labels. And actually, these labels are nothing more than a brief experience within a tiny band of frequency that we know as and that we call the world. These are the versions of self-identity that dictate our sense of the I from cradle to the grave, and do little more than divide and separate us from each other, as well as from our true, eternal, infinite self. The more you subdivide your sense of the I, the more you are withdrawing from that greater, eternal, infinite I. Or, as in my opening example, the more you are walking away from home and everything you learned there in your home, in your eternal home. In reality, there is only one I, the all, that ever was, is, and ever can be. And each of us is a unique point of attention of that infinite I, that infinite unity and oneness. The more we self-identify with a label, the smaller we become. Why do we need labels? Why can we not just be who and what we are? When we cannot do this, and when we must identify with one or more labels, we create a phantom self, which is only an illusion. In other words, we've been manipulated into identifying with the experiences we have, which is where all the labels come from, rather than identifying with the I or true self that is having the experiences. We find ourselves in a place where we cannot separate our self from our experiences. So he then compares this to going on to an amusement park and getting on a roller coaster. Riding a roller coaster is just an experience that you have. You get on, the ride starts, then the ride ends, it goes, and then the ride ends and you get off. But while you're on the ride, it seems very real, and at times it seems like it will never end. And you spend a lot of time sometimes on a roller coaster going, "Oh dear God, why did I ever get on this? Please be over, please be over. I'll never do it again." So it's just difficult to remember that it is not the whole world when you're actually in the middle of the ride or the experience. So next he talks about what he calls the religion of I am a, and he compares it to people chanting. For those of you who know anything about yoga, the word om, or the way you say that, either om or is often chanted. And this syllable, this word, has various meanings. One is that it's a sacred sound as well as a spiritual symbol. In fact, we have it up on our big symbol of stained glass in our sanctuary that signifies the essence of the ultimate reality or consciousness. Another of its meanings is a sound from which all other sounds and creations emerge. Another meaning of Om is supreme power. And yet another is that it represents the whole world and all of its sounds, thus noting our connection to the universe. It's often used both at the beginning and at the end of a meditation session. So David Icke is talking about how this syllable, om, like that, is very close in the way that it sounds when chanted to I am, which spelled out is I am a, in words. And then he's talking about how that's really the greatest religion that people follow today, that's what we worship, whatever label we choose to fill in that blank after I am a. Okay, take your pick of labels from that point, from any of the ones that he listed at the beginning of his talk. I am a man. I am a woman. Then you can further subdivide with more labels. I am a black, heterosexual, Republican, Christian man. I am a white, lesbian, Democratic, Buddhist woman. And each label and subdivision separates you further and further, as he said earlier, from both your true infinite eternal self as well as further away from others. He says this process that we use to label and subdivide and separate ourselves has become the greatest religion of mankind. We have come to worship our labels and have identified with them so much that we have become them. However, this is not, he says, our true self, but only what he calls a phantom self. So this is very similar to the teaching we're actually going through on Wednesday nights with the book, The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Tune in tomorrow night at 7 p.m. It's very similar. He talks about how when we identify with our mind and our labels, we become them. Okay, then he talks for a bit about how we all got here to this place as a collective. He thinks that this process of us all creating these phantom selves for ourselves, rather than being able to identify with our true self, or as we've called it before, the observer, the self that is capable of having beliefs and having experiences, but knowing we are neither our beliefs nor our experiences. He thinks this process has been greatly aided by the advent of social media. And I agree with him about that. As I've said many times before, social media and the internet in general is neither good or evil. It is just a tool to be used. It can be used either positively or negatively. I'm using it today to communicate with you. And thank God for that right now, because much of the world is using it to stay connected to each other during this time when it's not completely safe to be together physically. So I'm not condemning the internet or social media with what I will say next, just making an observation, and it's actually not my observation, it's his, I just happen to agree with it, that many people, not all, but many are using it negatively. And unfortunately, that's just a reflection of who we are and where we are as a species at the moment. So remember last week I was talking about our political leaders being a reflection of who we are as a collective, and that when we raise our vibration, the quality of our leaders will rise as well. Same thing with social media and internet content. When we as individuals raise our vibration, that will all rise as well. But for now, this is where we are. Back to David. He says, social media polices the orthodoxy of the I am a fill-in-the-blank religion, ensuring that anyone who doesn't conform gets abused and ridiculed and condemned. And this has caused many to lose their true self-identity as the infinite I of higher consciousness, and to get pulled into this religion of labeling themselves. This has resulted in catastrophic consequences, especially among young people. And here are a few statistics that bear that out. These are from a documentary called Plugged In. Teenage suicide has seen a 50% increase in females under the age of 17 and a 30% increase in males in the smartphone/social media era as opposed to before it. Teenage anxiety and depression has increased by 70% over the last 25 years. The number of young people and children treated at emergency rooms for psychiatric conditions has more than doubled since 2009. Hospital admissions for teenagers with eating disorders have also almost doubled in only the last 3 years. The fact that this has happened in the era of smartphones and social media is not a coincidence. It is an example of cause and effect. The pressure to conform to the orthodoxy, even in the way you look, okay? Our obsession with our physical appearance is directly related to our identifying ourselves with labels, because we are not secure in our true identity. We are constantly looking outside ourselves with our phantom selves for confirmation from the phantom selves of others that we're okay, that we are accepted and acceptable. So in this scenario, in this religion, we get all of our security and validation from external sources. This is also why people only post the best photographs of themselves and even Photoshop them, because they're not at peace with their uniqueness. Who they are as themselves is not good enough. This is also why plastic surgery has become so popular, so that our physical appearance will be acceptable to the masses. This is destroying young people. Okay, time out. I want to insert a personal story here to show you that this doesn't only affect young people. I think most people who follow me here and who would normally come on to a connection service when we have in-house services would not consider themselves particularly young. All of us are young at heart. I know that. But you know what I'm talking about. I don't think I have a huge teenage following. So so what I want to give you is an example of how this mentality can affect us at any age. I joined Facebook back in 2009 when I was 44 years old, so firmly in the category of middle-aged. And as a result of joining Facebook, I began at that time reconnecting with many people who I hadn't seen or been a part of their lives in real life for many, many years, some of them even for decades. And so among these, of course, were people I had known in high school and college years. And so at that time, my high school friends started having these get-togethers or mini reunions for all of us who still lived in the Atlanta area. And sometimes even people who had moved away would even come back to specifically for these events, which they usually happen once or twice a year, one in the summer when people would have vacation time. And then especially the big one was at Christmas, because a lot of the people who had moved away still had family and parents that lived in Atlanta, so they would come home, and it was just a convenient time. So Facebook and other forms of social media, when they came into being, they were like this giant reuniting of everybody from your past. You could look up anybody and see what they'd been up to for, the past few years. So I think it was Christmas of 2011 or 2012, which would have made me even older, 46 or 47, and I went to one of these get-togethers that my high school had, and it was at this restaurant/bar, and I remember walking in, and the first person I saw was this man, which I had known him as a boy, and he was like one of the popular kids at school. He's, always wore the right clothes and listened to the right music and had a cool car and dated the pretty girls and played sports. And so I never dated him, and I didn't really even hang out in his particular circle, but we knew each other, and we had begun this relationship on Facebook for a couple of years. But we hadn't actually seen each other in person since 1983, the day that we graduated from high school. So here I was, a grown woman, closer to 50 than to 40. My kids were almost grown, middle school and high school age. I had been married close to 20 years. I considered myself at the time, and still do now, a pretty self-confident person. I'm not particularly shy. I don't consider myself an introvert. And in my life, up until that time, I had been in the presence of and at dinner tables with some pretty important people and dignitaries, both in the church world and in the political world. I'd met governors and senators and presidential candidates. I'd been exposed to pastors of mega churches, all of gospel Hollywood, et cetera, et cetera. I was even considered a little bit as royalty in these circles because of who my family was. So anyway, and I had also been pretty popular in my high school. So what I'm about to describe to you in light of all that might seem odd, but it happened. And it's a perfect illustration of what David Icke is talking about here, how we're all subject to that peer pressure and that need to be validated by other people. And sometimes we base our self-confidence a lot of times from those external sources. So I walk into this gathering, as I said, fairly self-confident, not really the type of person who's easily intimidated by other people. I'm not awkward in social situations. So the first person I see is this guy who was flown in from out of town to be here. And there's this group of people gathered around listening to him, as there usually was in high school. And when he sees me, he doesn't stop talking, but he smiles and he kind of goes like this and motions me over. And so I'm telling you, the minute he did that, all he did was kind of go. Instantly, I was 16 years old again in Southwest DeKalb High School cafeteria being called over to the cool kids table at lunch. My heart started fluttering, and I walked across the room like, did everybody just see that who called me over? Okay. I was 47 years old when this happened. So it's not just young people who fall prey to what he's talking about here, this religion, this orthodoxy of labeling ourselves, dividing ourselves up between us and them, the cool kids and the nerds, and then getting our validation from which group we happen to be accepted into. Okay, so this phenomenon does not discriminate on the basis of age. It is an equal opportunity destroyer. All right. So let's move to the other side now. Let's move from the people who feel pressured and bullied to conform into what everyone else expects them to be to the bullies themselves, who on the internet they are affectionately or maybe not so affectionately referred to as trolls. First of all, it's pretty common knowledge that most bullies behave the way that they do in order to cover up some deficiency in their own character or to alleviate their own sense of insecurity. So they, too, in a twisted way, are searching for external validation because, above all, bullies don't want to feel powerless. And it gives them a sense of power, false though it may be, to be able to cause someone else pain. So secondly, he makes this observation about trolls and online bullies, which I find very insightful. He says, why do we think we need to conform to the standards of someone hiding behind a login name? If we want to take our power back, we've got to stop comparing ourselves to others and recognize that we are a unique expression of the divine mind. Knowing this Why would anyone want to be just like everyone else? Because we need security, of course, and if we don't already have it within ourselves, we must get it from an external source. Are we going to allow our uniqueness to be suppressed by someone who has so little respect for us and our unique expression that they would abuse us for not conforming to someone else's idea of who we should be? And we should remember this too, that the power is not with those who abuse us. The power is in how we respond. So if you're hurt by someone else's abuse because you won't conform to their phantom self's fantasy, then you are giving your power to them. And think of it this way. If you ask someone who is being bullied and abused what they think of the people who are doing it to them, they'll likely say they're horrible. Okay, so if they're horrible people, why do you want their approval? Why do you care if you get it or not? And most importantly, why are you giving your power away to a horrible person? Okay, I never quite thought about it that way before, but it makes so much sense. People who are on that low vibrational level of bullying, why do you care what they have to say, or why do you want their approval? Why would you want the approval of someone who is horrible enough to be a bully? Especially when you're enlightened enough to know that that's just a reflection of their own stuff and really says nothing about you. Okay, so that's just some food for thought. Back to David. You don't have to conform, and I'll tell you what you'll find. When you refuse to compromise your own uniqueness, the world starts to come to you instead of you always trotting behind the crowd looking for acceptance and validation. Okay, so this is me talking now. You might be thinking at this point, why are you talking to us, a group of spiritually mature people, about peer pressure on the internet? We're all past caring about what people say about how we look, etc. Well, because it's just the principle that everyone understands. It goes so much deeper than that. What he's talking about here, he's talking about the religion and the worship of labels and the necessity for all of us to conform to the point that we fit in to either one camp or another. And that goes way beyond how we look or how we dress. It goes into what we believe about God and the nature of God. There are all different camps of that. Who we love, who we vote for, what we choose to do for a living, how we make our money, how we choose to spend our money. We are all judged every single day in those areas, and we are pressured to have the same priorities in those areas as everybody else does. When you say, I am a Christian, everybody else starts filling in the blanks for you. Okay, then you must believe this, 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 and this. Not necessarily. I am an American. Okay, well then you must behave like this. Not necessarily. So let's go back to when he called this a religion of I am, and then whatever label you decide to fill in after that phrase. I read a quote the other day, and this is what it said. It said, energy always serves. Energy always says, I am. And then whatever you choose to fill in after that statement directs the energy of the I am for you. I had never heard it said that way, but that's very powerful. When you say I am and then you put something after it, that I am holds powerful energy. And so whatever you say after it directs that energy of I am to whatever it is you say. So, having given you all this information from David Icke, I could have basically boiled it down to this. Don't let anyone else fill in that blank after the words I am for you, because those words are full of power. You should always be the only one to fill in that blank, and eventually, hopefully, you'll reach the point where no label is needed and you can simply say, I am that I am. I am that I am leaves no room for labels. Okay, so now that we've addressed that question of who am I, the next question is, where am I? Or in terms of the collective, where are we? Where have we gotten to as a culture, as a society? Is it a good place? I think on the whole, most of us would answer no to that question. We are not in a good place right now. I'm not saying this is true. I'm saying there's a perception right now that there's more hatred than love, more separation than unity, more destruction than creation, and more discord than harmony. And looking from a certain perspective, I would agree with that. But the key word that I use there is perception. So let's talk about that word for a minute. And for this, I'm going to stay with David Icke, just moving to a different presentation of his. And this one is called A Revolution in Perception. And he's talking about how powerful our minds are. And if by using our very powerful minds, we've gotten to this not so good place, it would make sense that we can also use our very powerful minds to get us to a very good place, okay? We can use it to remember who we are. This is not a new concept for us here at Connection, but I just hope to shed some new light on it today. So David Icke says, what is this place, this reality we are experiencing? And he's not talking about this specific moment in time. He's talking about our world. We take it for granted that what we're told about reality is true. Okay, time out. Are you beginning to sense a pattern here? He always does this. He always presents something and then he says, but are people telling you the truth? I love that about him. He's very curious. He always questions. If nothing else, he's very consistent. So he goes on, we are led to believe that we live in a solid, physical, material world where everything has space between it. We are led to believe there is such a thing as linear time that moves from past to present to future, and that the interaction of this materiality is random. It just happens. We are told that every solid thing is separate from every other solid thing, and that we and our world are little more than a cosmic accident. But there is another way of looking at things that puts it in a completely different light. What if this reality wasn't solid or physical really at all? What if we just experience it like that? The resistance that allows me to sit in this chair without falling through is not physical, but rather electromagnetic. Think of our existence as Wi-Fi. Wi-Fi is made up of fields of information, of radiation, and our computers connect with that field of radiation or information being radiated, and then puts that information onto our screens in a totally different form from the way that same information is expressed in the Wi-Fi field. What the computer has done is decode the information, translated it into a different form that then is how we experience the information. If you ask people what the internet is, they might describe it as a place that contains or projects graphics and words and colors and pictures and movies and videos on a screen. Well, yes, it is. But only on the screen of your computer is it that way, okay? The internet looks like that. Everywhere else in the Wi-Fi field, it is nothing but code, which is made up of letters and numbers and symbols in a particular order. Okay, so you know what he's talking about here. There's such a thing as computer code, and it's not pictures and movies and it's just letters and numbers and symbols that then get translated onto your screen as this experience of a movie, of a picture, of words. But what he's saying is there has to be a translation and a decoding that takes place because that's not the form it's in the field. So he goes on and says that's roughly how our minds work. What we are doing through our biological computers, our bodies, is decoding information from a cosmic Wi-Fi field. And we're translating that information into a different form, which is then projected onto the screen of our mind. And this is how we experience reality. So let's put an end to the idea that we live in a solid world. We don't. Well, now you're saying we must live in a solid world because it's made up of atoms, and atoms are solid. Are they? Here's a quote about atoms, which are the building blocks of our existence. If the nucleus or center of the atom were the size of a peanut, the atom would be about the size of a baseball stadium. So that's the proportion we're dealing with. The so-called space in between a peanut and a baseball stadium is what is the same proportion as an atom. If we lost all the dead space inside our atoms, we would each be able to fit into a particle of dust, and the entire human race would fit into the volume of a sugar cube. So, the world ain't solid. He said that, not me. But we decode it so that we experience it that way. Everything in our world exists in wave form and only becomes solid by virtue of what quantum scientists now call the observer effect. And we've talked about this before. What he's describing is something that's been discovered by quantum physics, that nothing is really a solid particle until somebody observes it. It's just a waveform, and it's our attention and observation that makes it solid. That's been proven over and over. So I want you to think about that for just a moment, about what that says about how powerful our minds are. That quote that he used said that if all the dead space were somehow gotten rid of, all that's actually solid of the entire human race would fit into the volume of a sugar cube, and that each of us would only be as big as a single particle of dust. So that means that everything else we see and experience, we are creating with our minds. That is absolutely incredible to me. So back to David. He says, the act of observing and then decoding and translating information with our minds triggers the waveform to become physical reality. So what we experience as the world outside ourselves is actually all going on inside of us, just as the internet, as we experience it, is all going on inside the computer. Throughout history, we have been discouraged from exploring what reality actually is, because once we realize how it works, we realize we are the ones in control, not random events. We realize we are not at the mercy of life, we are creating life. We live within this cosmic Wi-Fi, or what some have called the quantum field, within which is infinite possibility. And the key to it all is our perception. Everything is a frequency. Hate, love, every single emotion. Our perceptions are also frequencies. So if you have a perception of yourself as little me with no power, then that's the frequency you will live on, through which all the information coming from the field will be translated onto your screen. You are therefore interacting with this quantum field of infinite possibility through only a very small bandwidth. So what you create with that feedback loop is a self-fulfilling prophecy. You will live a life that is manifested from a perception of little me with no power. But if you have the perception that you are conscious awareness connected to and part of all that is, my body is only the vehicle through which this greater awareness flows, then that becomes a completely different experience of reality. As your perception expands, so does your bandwidth. So thank you for all of that, Mr. David Icke. So what I want to say to you now is this. Given this information of how incredibly powerful our minds are, what we are able to create with just our minds alone, the entire human race only having enough solid material to fill the volume of a sugar cube, and everything else that we have created with our minds, and knowing, as we've talked about before, that as powerful as the mind is, it's still just a tool that we use, and a greater power, a higher power, is in our connection to our higher self, to the power that creates worlds. Then knowing all of that, how dare any of us say, I just can't, whatever, and fill in the blank? How can we possibly ever again say, I can't forgive, I can't forget, I can't succeed, I can't overcome, I can't stop being afraid, I can't stop being angry, I can't let go of my need to control, I can't live in a state of unconditional love? Yes, you can. And again, I'll say it. If your mind alone can create the entire human race from only enough solid material to fill the volume of a sugar cube, your spirit and connection to the Christ consciousness that's within you can create or accomplish anything. Once we understand and perceive this, we are completely out of excuses. That is remembering who we are. However, most of us are not living in that bandwidth. Most of us right now are not on that frequency. If we were, we would not be living in this constant, heightened state of fear and panic over a virus. Our perception of COVID would not be that it is something that's just beyond us, that it's something we cannot control, that we can't figure out, that we are powerless against it, that it's a random event that we are at the mercy of. So don't misunderstand me. Am I saying that the virus isn't real? No, of course I'm not. Am I saying it's not powerful? No, it is. I'm saying that the largest part of its power is our perception of it. We have given it power collectively, just as people sometimes give power to internet bullies, like we talked about earlier, through our perception of it as well as through our perception of ourselves. Now, again, do not misunderstand me. I'm not saying don't take it seriously. I'm not saying don't follow the protocols. I'm definitely not saying it's a hoax. It is real. But it is real because we have made it real. Okay, we've made it real in the same way we've made this podium real and that table real and our bodies real. Okay, we know they're just waveforms. Our mind makes them real. Our perception makes them real. That's the same thing we've done to this. So it's real because of our perception, and it's real because we as a collective needed something of this magnitude to occur to facilitate our spiritual growth and evolution. I talked about this a couple of weeks ago when I said the call is coming from inside the house. As we say often around here, the universe will always send you whatever experience you need to further your spiritual growth. My brother preached an entire sermon on that just a few weeks ago. Now, I know this might be hard for you to wrap your mind around, but I truly believe that if we as a collective, as a whole, were on a different frequency right now, if we were, as David Icke was saying, on a higher level of bandwidth, then there would be no coronavirus because we wouldn't need to experience it. Therefore, we would not have created it. But we have created it, and it is here, and that is where we are. So now I'm going to suggest that we are where we are because we have forgotten who we are. We have identified with that perception of ourselves as little me, I have no power, for so long that we've given our power away to others through these labels for so long. We've identified with our pain body and with what our mind and what other people's phantom selves are telling us for so long that that's what we have become. We don't, at this time, collectively perceive ourselves as the creators of our own reality. Some of us, as individuals, have awakened to that concept, but as a collective, we have not. We are not there. So, how do we get there? How do we remember who we are? A few weeks ago, I spoke on the art of being counterintuitive, and I think that's what it's going to take now. We want to go up, okay? We want to get to that higher frequency and bandwidth, and therefore it would be counterintuitive for us to go down. But I believe that's where we're going to have to go. We're going to have to dig deep. As I've also talked about recently, we've got to face our shadow now, not only as individuals, but as a collective. Back in the 1990s, Madonna recorded an album called Ray of Light. And it was an uncharacteristically spiritual album for her. She's another one of those people that kind of evokes strong emotions from people. You either love her or you hate her. But regardless of which side you fall on, this album, pretty much every song on this album had a very spiritual meaning, and I just love the album. And I was reminded yesterday as I was studying for this of one of the songs on that album, and it's called Swim. And I love the imagery of the song. I know y'all know how much I love imagery. She's talking about swimming from one shore to another. So from our purposes, the imagery would be from where we are now to where we want to be. But in the song, it's not a straight shot across. I'm going to read some of the lyrics, and as I do, listen to where it says she goes and why she goes there. I believe it's very symbolic of the journey we're all on right now. She says, "Put your head on my shoulder, baby. Things can't get any worse." Have you heard people around you saying that right now? Night is getting colder. Sometimes life feels like it's a curse. I can't carry these sins on my back. I don't want to carry anymore. I'm going to carry this train off the track. I'm going to swim to the ocean floor, crash to the other shore, swim to the ocean floor. Okay, notice here where she says she goes. Not straight to the other shore, but down to the ocean floor. Why? Because of the sins she feels she's carrying on her back are so heavy, she's got to go down before she goes up. And I found that imagery so interesting. Then there's another verse, but then when she comes to the chorus again, instead of saying I, she says we. We can't carry these sins on our back anymore. So she's moved from the individual to the collective. And then the imagery describes a baptism of sorts. It's interesting that my brother talked about the rain today and how it always makes him think of cleansing. Okay, so that's the imagery of this. She says, "Let the water wash over you, wash all over you, swim to the ocean floor, so that we can begin again. Wash away all our sin, crash to the other shore." Now notice she didn't mention anybody dying to save us from our sins or praying a prayer or accepting someone as our Lord and Savior as the remedy. She describes a salvation experience where all the sins that are weighing us down are washed away by the act of us going all the way down to the ocean floor, where we presumably drop them and then swim or crash, as she puts it, onto the other shore where we can begin again. I just love that song, and I've got two short little object lessons. That's what I used to call them when I was teaching kids in Sunday school. Two things that happened this week that kind of tie into this imagery, what I'm talking about. On my shower, I have a glass door instead of a curtain. And so down where the metal holds the glass, there's like this little groove. And so when you're cleaning it, if you don't scrub really, really hard, then the way I clean it, the way I rinse it is I have a cup in there with me, and I just like splash water. And so you'll see it's so gross, but sometimes, like, if you haven't dug deep enough or if you haven't cleaned in a while, this goo, this black goo will form, and it'll just like come out of that groove. And it's interesting because the more water you throw in there, sometimes you think, oh, that's got to be all. There can't be more gunk in here. But there's always more. It's like the deeper you dig, the more gunk there is. So that kind of reminded me of, symbolically, us looking at our shadow. Sometimes you think that's got to be all there is. I've dealt with all of it. I've dealt with every single negative part of myself. And then you throw the water of the Spirit on there, and it's like, there's some more goo. There's some more gunk. There's some more down there. So that's where we are right now. That's what we're having to do. We're having to dig deep into our collective shadow and deal with all the goo that's been building up there for decades, like racism, greed, the reasons that we've gone to war, how we've treated poor people. All of that, that's some really ugly muck down in that groove, and it's time for us now to get it all out. It's so heavy that the weight of it is pushing us all the way down to the ocean floor, where we can drop it and swim back up, washed by the water of Spirit, and begin again. So that was just a cool little object lesson. Then the second thing that happened is I am a coffee drinker. And recently I've gotten as gifts a couple of coffee mugs that are kind of oversized, which are great because they hold a lot and you don't have to refill them. But when they're full, they're much heavier than a regular cup. So you can't really, or I can't, hold it just by the handle. I have to use both of my hands until I drink enough where it's about halfway down. So for the first half, like I said, I have to use both my hands. So yesterday morning, I was sitting out on the porch drinking it, and I was having to use both my hands. And I thought, what's happening now is collectively all of our sins, and when you know that when I use that word, I don't mean sin in the normal concept. I mean our stuff, our muck, our goo, our collective shadow. All of that has become so heavy that it has taken something as big as this coronavirus, as the tipping point of police brutality, so that we would be forced to use both of our hands to regain our balance. I've also taught recently that When we allow the universe to get out of balance, it automatically will do things to regain that balance. And so when I refer to the universe, I really mean our collective higher self. So in other words, we've let things get so heavy and out of balance that the universe had to send a collective oversized coffee mug so that we have to use both hands now. We can't just say, we can't just push it under the rug anymore. We've got to really concentrate on holding and maintaining the balance so that our entire world can regain the balance that it needs, unless we want hot coffee all over our laps, which is the other alternative. So I heard Amanda Ellis, one of my favorite people, do a teaching recently on this shift to a higher dimension, to new earth. And she was kind of comparing it to the process that we now go on to get on an airplane. She said, before we're granted access to the entrance of New Earth, we must empty our pockets of everything that's in them that's on a low frequency, because everything that's of that lower frequency and energy has to be left behind. We're not going to be able to go to this higher place with all that stuff in our pockets, which is the same concept I've been talking about, because these things that have been weighing us down have led us to the place where we are. So in order to remember who we are, we must disconnect from all of those lower vibration energies and practice here what we learned at home, that place that we came from before we incarnated into a physical body, and where we will return to after we leave this physical body. So I'm going to end by reading a piece that she wrote called The Pilgrim's Way, that to me perfectly describes those things that I'm talking about. The things that we need to empty our pockets of, that we need to leave behind in order to remember who we are and walk through the entrance to, or get to the other side of the shore. She says, I will never apologize for standing up for love. I will never stop the fight to end this game of separation that so many of us are invested in. Black versus white, left versus right, country versus country, religion versus religion, us against them, you against me. I see now very clearly what I have started. I hear very well now how I have been asked to serve. I see Christ before me, together with all the angels and guides. They are with you also. I will not sow hate. I will not sow judgment. I will not endorse anything or anyone as the only way or answer. In my house are many rooms indeed, and every brick of that house makes up the whole. Every crumbling old brick from a bygone era allows us the opportunity to place a new one back that is better than that which went before. How will you know what you want now unless you are shown what you have outgrown and what is no longer needed or acceptable in New Earth? We see the whole story, all the players, the whole game, and we serve at ground level while also accessing the higher perspective. We will learn together greater tolerance of our differences. We will practice what we preach. We will be there for each other and pick each other up when we fall and fail, as we all will, and we will try again. We will turn away from fear and truly integrate into our physical selves the idea that only love heals anything, and it must start with us. We will see in each other common ground rather than our differences. We will turn away from preaching division and hate. We will not slander. We will not promote fear and worst-case scenarios. We will not be rude, arrogant, or full of ego. We will pause and think before posting, speaking, or creating potential damage, because sticks and stones break bones, it's true, but words can break someone's spirit. Let us not do that. That person you break is a reflection of you. It is now a shattered mirror that you look into that needs putting back together. Social media has blurred the lines. This is what David Icke was talking about too. It has made us forget who we were and are. It has led many of us astray and into our shadow, where that shadow has been allowed to grow and grow unchallenged, where judgment, blame, arguing, and intolerance have become accepted as the norm. I no longer align to that. I no longer want to be associated with that. I seek a new way. We will also acknowledge where we are in our spiritual development and always strive to do better. None of us is the finished product. We acknowledge the darkness we see in others and own our contribution to it. We endeavor to heal that which makes the fire burn higher. Darkness only exists because of an absence of love. We vow to leave behind our vanity and pride and to instead seek humility, gentleness, and compassion. We will shine as brightly as we can. We will love our enemy as we love ourselves. We will do unto others as we would have done unto us. We will see the divine in everything. And to those who don't understand or can't join us, we send them peace and allow them to take their journey, to walk their path. To just be who you are is where the change starts. That is where the rebirth happens. That is where everything shifts, the inner to the outer, as within, so without. I am up for the journey. This is the Pilgrim's Way. Who will join me? We are at a crossroads where two paths meet. Choose wisely. One will stretch you beyond your comfort zone and on to new horizons. The other is an endless maze. There may be hills and ravines ahead, but together we can do this. Amen.
I am a promise. I am a possibility. I am a promise. Psst, with a capital P. I am a great big bundle of potentiality. And I am learning to hear God's voice and to make the right choice. I am a promise to be everything He wants me to be. Anybody remember that song? That may be White Kids Children's Church. I don't know if I remember or not. So before our church became mostly African American, but we had a few white days in there. That was so good today. I love the teaching, any teaching on the power of the I am. I'm the only one who can say I am about me, and my I am remains strong as long as you are doesn't become my I am. And so, what a powerful, powerful teaching today. We receive it, we perceive it, and we just accept everything that God has for us today. I did want to give some quick shouts out to everybody who's watching today. Wanted to say happy Tuesday morning to Miss Mary Hayes, Ben and Vicky, Rosaline, Pastor Don, Doreen, Richard Copeland, Joanne, Donnie, Pastor Cassius, Myrna, Emma. Miss Emma sent me an email a couple days ago. How sweet. Callie, Bobby, Megan, Megan. We know it's always pronounced Megan. Sheila, Elaine, Laverne, Alita, Gloria, Justina, Terry, Reverend John Scott. Hey, my friend. Debbie, and last but not least, Miss Sylvia Garrett. So sweet that you guys joined with us today. I wanted to end with some good news today. Our children's ministry sent me a little heart and a encouraging message, and I want to read some of it to you. It's the most precious thing. It just said, "I hope you're doing well, and we know what you're going through as our pastor. We know it's difficult, but we know that you're making the right decisions and listening to God." And it says at the top right here, it says, pastors' lives matter too. And then it says, love from the children's ministry. And it says, P.S., Spirit and Truth Sanctuary is lit. That was the joy of the Lord for me today. That's what I needed today. So thank you. Let's do this for each other. Let's send encouraging messages to each other. Stay connected. No, we're not able to be in each other's space right now, but we're able still to be in each other's minds, and knowing that we love each other, we're always connected. We look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow night. Remember, tomorrow night with Bishop Pearson, he will be talking and teaching us through, I think this is either the 6th or 7th week of the power of now. Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. It's going to be a powerful teaching. I'm excited for everybody to do it. Invite a friend. It's always a privilege to get to hear Bishop Pearson, who he just a wealth of walking knowledge and wisdom, and it just flows out like that. And so we want to experience that all together tonight. We'll see you tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Go in peace, and may God bless you.